Carl and Jhoane Robinson discussing kids' focus and attention.
We were working with somebody that works in sonotropic sound therapy. That's using the voice as a biological indicator of the body, the condition of the body, the varying body systems, and what are the energy levels that are going on. And the person that developed that technology was using this focus and attention with children and started observing an interesting phenomenon. She thought about it and decided, you know what, I'm going to try this with adults. And she did, and the same thing came up. And what was found was that the adrenals were weak prior to using the focus and attention, but when the product was used, the adrenals in the voice biological testing came up much higher. The energy, in other words, started rising. She looked at it and says, and talked with me, and we made at the time, the hypothetical assertion that possibly the adrenals are involved in these attention deficit, hyperactive, lack of focus conditions. And so over the next year or so, that hypothesis was put to the test, and it was found that any time we attempted to settle a child's adrenal activity, in other words, instead of it being so hyper, but get it balanced, there was a concurrent settling down in their hyperactivity, and they tended to focus. They didn't sit there and have their brains all over the place, which brings me to one point I want to bring out. Attention deficit disorder is a bad definition, and it totally, in linguistically, misdiagnoses the condition. These kids are not attention deficit. They're attention distracted. They are so focused to everything going on around them, it's hard for them to focus on one point. So focus, yes, they have a focus deficit. But to call them attention deficit? They're hyper attentive to everything going on around them.
Everything but what maybe the adults want them to.
Exactly. And you know what, though? Everything goes back to the language. And because they've used that term, there's a whole drug protocol that's come up and is used and is actually used to suppress what they think needs to be suppressed. And the sad thing is it's blunting their learning process. It's actually creating addictions. It's scrambling their nervous system up. They're having behavioral and discipline disorder situations. A lot of oppositional defiant disorder comes into play that is actually driven by these psychotropic drugs that are given to suppress the hyperactivity. Well, the trade-off is just way too much.
Yeah, well, we found that a lot of these problems are actually an imbalance in the what's called the HPA axis.
Absolutely.
The hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands. The balance and axis of it, them working together in keeping the body functioning, the mind functioning in a balanced manner.
And the interesting thing about the HPA axis, it's also been studied to be the core of our immune system. If the HPA axis gets overstressed or goes into an exhausted state, that's when you have all kinds of immunological problems. And the interesting thing is that anywhere there is profound autoimmune conditions, you'll almost always see a stressed HPA axis profile.
That's absolutely what we've been finding.
Yes. So
that focus and attention formula, excellent formula, can be taken on a regular daily basis. It is a good as needed, but it's really a building and balancing formula that can be taken over a period of time.
Well, you mentioned in the beginning it has adaptogen herbs. Mm-hmm. Adaptogen is a term that was actually coined by the Russians, and it came out of their studies in eleuthero root, also at one time known as Siberian ginseng. What they found is that by taking this with their athletes who were stressing their bodies and they were under a lot of emotional and mental stress, they found that when they took certain herbs that contained these adaptogenic properties, there was a calming effect. And they found, oh my gosh, it calms the system. And further research found it not only calmed the system, it balanced it, because that's what an adaptogen does. That's why it's called adapt. It helps the body's stress responsors to balance and to adapt and then go to a healthy level of dynamic balance. So their studies were originally with athletes, and then it was carried on over into other areas of health. And now it's a well-established fact, even in medicine, medical science. These adaptogens are a very, very important component of maintaining health. They don't stimulate health. They maintain and balance the health and immunity of the body. And a lot of times, children that are having attention and focusing problems also have constant problems with allergies. They may have constant problems with sniffles, with colds and things like that. Now, we can't make any diagnosing claims here or prescribing claims. But what I can say is these are symptoms that are natural to stress. And what an adaptogen does, it goes in and it's not going to kick the cold out. It's not going to kick the allergy out. It's going to build the body's reserves, energy reserves, and its immune system so it can take care of itself. So see,
helps to strengthen the body's ability to be well and healthy.
So focus and attention is not going to cure. It's not going to get rid of the bad boys in the body, the bugs and all that stuff. It's not about that. It's about that nutritional, that correcting of the body's own structure and functions that are going inside. It's about the biochemistry and the physiology and building the tissues. Because if those things are in place, like a healthy field that's been properly fed and properly watered and not been hit with over-chemicalization, i.e. drugs, and all that kind of stuff, and food colorings, and additives, and too much sugar, all those things that are in a metaphorical
corn syrup,
that are all indicative, metaphorically speaking, of chemicalizing an agricultural field, a crop. If you take a more organic, more natural approach and use something like the adaptogens that build, just like building the soil, what do you end up with? Healthy soil and wonderful food. Same thing, a healthy body with healthy behavior.
Well, that's very, very well put. So, focus and attention. A great complex herbal formula in the Tink Tract by Cedar Bear Naturals.